Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Revving Up with Revenge. I'm your host, Kwangdo. This is a show where we give you the inside scoop and latest trends in sales compensation, go-to-market strategy, and all things RevOps. And I'm thrilled to kick off this brand new season with a very special guest, John Lee. John is truly one of the who's who in sales compensation with over 25 years in the space across a variety of function and roles. John, thank you so much for joining us today. But before we dive in, a big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, Akron, Enterprise Incentive Compensation, built for global complexity. If you're in the market for a new ICM solution, head over to akron.com to learn more. So, John, it is almost the end of January. And I have to ask, is it too early to talk about governance?
Governance is the foundation of everything related to compensation or just how you run an organization, right? So
Okay.
never too
All
early.
right. What makes a well-tuned governance operating model look like? What does that look like?
Yeah, exactly what you said. A lot of clients and customers will come to you later on during the year, and that's
Yeah.
because they're reacting to something. And I think if you set up the right governance structure
Yeah.
and do it very proactively, it just lays the foundation. It creates the level of trust, creates the level of transparency and accountability at the end of the day, right? It's
Yeah.
sort of like when you walk into a beautiful building and you just trust, like it was designed and built properly. And then you walk into the elevator of a building and it takes you up 85 floors. You trust the elevator is going to operate, right?
Yeah.
The foundational blocks that's needed in a well-designed operating model for governance structure, right? So, you need that foundation. You need a foundation of like, do we have the right guiding principles? Are we setting ourselves up for success? Are we setting the company up for success? Do we have what protocols we have? Do we have a business continuity plan? Do we have processes in place? Where do we have some gaps? Figure out your foundation first. Right. And then once you figure that out, you got your playbook, which is just your operating model, right? The rhythm of the business. And from there, that's all about transparency. So once you build the level of the trust, which is the foundation, then you build, the transparency. That's where you got to do the weeklies and the monthlies and the quarterly check-ins. You got to pull data. You got to go assess, evaluate, monitor, and just kind of look and go, are we following, the governance? Are we hitting our goals? Like, do you have bookings goals? Do you have an accountability margin goal? Are you hitting all of those? Do you have, layers of systems you need to go improve on? Do you have compliance issues? Like, you got to monitor and have a good plan. So you need a really good project manager and a program manager that's well designed. So it's not something where you just kind of give it to someone and it's
Yeah.
10% of their work. You need a dedicated person or group of people that you trust. And they also have that same level of passion. At the end of the day, you're trying to protect the company. You're trying
Yeah.
to mitigate your risk, but you're also trying to propel the company to hit their bookings growth as well, right? And then once you design all of this, part of the design is like who's who,
Yeah.
right? The accountability layer around that, like, okay, sales leader, you're responsible for this. Finance leader, you're responsible for this. Comp design person, you're responsible for this. Policy person, you're responsible for this, right? Quota, RevOps, you're responsible for quota and territory. And make that very clear. So when there is an escalation or an issue, you know exactly who has the decision or who can make the recommendation for a decision as well. Right? So that you remove all the reactive layers. You're still going to react to some situation, but at least you have a playbook around
Yeah.
that. So that's for me, that's one of the hardest things to do, right? Because we're running so fast, and you're like, all right, I got a head count, I got some capacity. Where do I throw that into?
Yeah.
And the last thing people think about is the governance and the controls and compliance. Like you build that structure. So, it's kind of like building a house and you just want the bright, shiny objects. Right? And then you're like, well, it's going to take a lot of plumbing. It's going to take a lot of electrical. electrical know-how, you got to design it right. So I've been doing this for years. These are a lot of learnings and a lot
Yeah.
of things I've learned from others around like where should you start? And for me, it's like that's the center of everything.
Yeah, I love the analogy, John, of a building, right? You walk into a building, you trust that it's going to work, you trust all the components, and that's I never thought about that way, but you're exactly right, right? Like a well-designed comp program should feel like that, and I wonder who should all be at the table, like who should be in the room making these decisions, and is there any, are there levels and layers to that?
Yeah, another analogy, like you're at a social setting and you got a group of friends
Yeah,
and really great people, great partners, great leaders, people that can make decisions, people that are very opinionated, and you're like, let's go order some dinner. And everyone's like, all right, I want Chinese food, I want pizza, right? I want
yeah,
hamburgers. And it's consensus. And you're
yep,
never going to get to a decision, and everyone's grumbling because they're hungry, right? They're hangry
yeah,
now,
yeah,
right? And you don't want to get to the point where you got friends and people around you and you're like just hangry, and then they all depart because they all want their own thing, right?
yep.
So from the core, you got to lay it out very specifically. And it just gets
You're just about telling me the secret how to get people to align on consensus when half want sushi and other want
yeah,
pizza. So
exactly. So I think it's one where you got to bring in the right people. You got to
yeah,
plan properly. You got to have, we use a rapid framework, which is like
yep,
recommend, agree, input, perform, and then decide.
yeah,
But with that layout, you need to know from a RACI standpoint who is accountable, right?
yep,
Who is ultimately accountable. And those are the people you need to bring along. So you still need the finance leader because they're
yeah,
responsible for the budget, the cost. You need the sales leader. They're responsible to really own the whole thing from the go-to-market strategy. What are they trying to achieve? What are their goals? And
yeah,
how can we get compensation to help change the
yep,
behavior so those goals can be met, right?
yep,
Then you need the comp leader, the comp practitioner, the
yeah,
professional that can design the plan, look at the market, look at various inputs, start to go source and look at, how do we change some of these behaviors? Do we have the right infrastructure in place? Do we have the right systems or operating models in place? And try to uncover every one of these things, right? And then obviously you got the RevOps group. The RevOps group ultimately roster management, territory split outs, right? ROE rules. Like you got to establish those policies, make it very clear and transparent, and then ultimately the quota. Like everyone, quota's king at the end of the
yeah,
day, with all this talk about AI and everything, and where we want our sales reps to focus,
yeah,
it's all in the quota.
yeah.
Their focus is about how do I achieve my quota and exceed it. All that other stuff is just noise to them.
Got it,
So
got it. Well, and I'm curious, you didn't. I don't think you mentioned HR, right? Where does HR have a
yes,
seat at that
HR is
group?
part of the comp design. Like so,
Okay.
depending where comp design sits, and typically at a company, comp design will kind of sit within the HR layer, the RevOps layer, or
Okay.
finance. And all
Yep.
three groups are going to be integrated as one. Like there needs to be
Okay.
harmony between the three because that's where you get the external market. That's where you get the
Yeah.
role identification. Like, should we have CSMs on a plan or should they not? What kind of splits should you know, sales development reps be on? Right. That's where HR has a lot of influence. And then you also have work council. Like, are we doing things where it might violate like a local law? Because we have
Yep.
multiple countries and we tend to only think about where HQ is located, right? And
Yeah.
that's where HR will come in and go, hey, you got to think about France, you got to think about Germany, Italy, right? Those are the countries that we need a little bit more special treatment, and you got to build policy around that as well, right? So they are a critical group around this. So
Yeah.
when I say comp design professionals, it's going to be a layer of whoever and wherever they sit, right? And it's not going to typically be one person. It's going to be a collection, but there will be only one person that makes a recommendation at the end of the day, and they could sit in HR, they could sit in finance, or they could sit in RevOps. And I've seen them in all three groups. I've actually been in all three at various.
How do you create a structure to, especially in global organizations, to manage all these different things that
Yeah.
are coming up, whether it's a one-off pay request, a pay mix change, all those, one-off exceptions.
Yeah. I think there's two categories of exceptions.
Yeah.
There's categories of like misunderstanding,
Yep.
right? Misinterpretation or their self interpretation or what they heard from another sales rep or sales leader. And then there's true exceptions. They know
Yeah.
the plan, they know the policies, and they're really asking for an exception, right?
Yep.
So if you try to cut through the noise, like there are going to be ones where, when it is just noise, that's where you have an opportunity. And you go, why do we have so much noise? It probably started with lack of communication, lack of transparency, lack of alignment, right?
Yeah.
If you have all that out there and you do a proper way of messaging all of this,
Yep.
people know this is my sandbox. This is my
Yeah.
playground. I know exactly what I can and can't do. And then
Yep.
they'll ask for an exception, right? And then there will be exceptions where, it'll go through a protocol. And these could be, I like to use more of like a traffic light
Yep.
analogy, which a lot of us use traffic lights, the green, yellow, and red light. Well, the green lights are the ones, they may be an exception, but we have a policy already built around that.
Yep.
Like it's a 5% rule for quota relief. And they go, hey, this account just churned. It follows the eligibility for me to submit for quota relief. Gets reviewed, and it just, upon review, it either gets rejected or doesn't. Right? So they know what the playbook is. Then there's going to be the ones that are more like yellow, and that's more of the misinterpretation of the policy. So it's either the spirit of the law or the letter
Yeah.
of the law. And that's where you have to set up a compensation committee. So this committee is a collection of RevOps and people that are representative, HR, that you get some legal advice. And you really have to look at the policy and maybe some of the processes and maybe some of the materials out there that's maybe on your company's SharePoint or something like that, and maybe it's outdated, right? So then you have to look at that and go, all right, is this the spirit or is this the letter we're going to go fall our sword on, right? And then there's the big red lights, like, hey, I want to just completely change the payments for my AE ones, and
Yeah.
it's the middle of the year, right? That goes through an executive review. Like that is something much bigger in scope. That should have been done during the design process before the launch of the new year, right? You can't do that middle of the year.
Yeah.
And those are some of the gotcha moments where it's like, did they know they can't ask for an exception middle of the
Yeah.
year? Because they know it's going to get rejected. There's so much
Yeah.
protocol. And red tape that needs to go through to get that going, because you can't do it for one country because another country doesn't allow for it, right? So you got to do it globally. You got to have a uniform strategy around that. Those strategy sessions should happen way before an exception comes through. Those should be thought about like for the next fiscal year. And typically those conversations should happen probably in your Q2 timeframe, not
Yep.
the 11th hour in Q4.
Yeah.
And people are talking about it, and you're like, no, there's a lot of things we need to go through before we change someone's payments. So,
What's the number one thing companies can do right now to avoid chaos, come fall and winter?
yeah, pre-mortem.
Pre-mortem. Okay.
Pre-mortem. Think
Okay.
about everything about what could happen in Q3.
Okay.
Think about that now. So
Love
rather
that
than
concept.
reacting, again, the reaction is one where we probably spend 80% of our time, and then
Yeah.
we try to find a solution, and you go, was that even worth spending our time? Right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things is clear communication, clear transparency, set up that governance operating model, monitor on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, report that out, look at areas of like, hey, here's some things that we should be starting to look at. And maybe it's
Yeah.
a H2, like a Q3 thing we should start to look at now than in Q3, right? So I think those are the things you should kind of look out for. Like you could have a well-designed plan, but if you can't deploy and execute on that plan, I think that's where a lot of people start to think about like,
Got it.
oh, the quotas were set wrong, the territories are off, right? We need to go change this role. It needs to be, let's go add another metric into the plan. We forgot this or that, right? Think about all of that in your design phase, but in Q1, like run that through a set of sales leaders, maybe some other trusted sales reps, and have them break it apart. So do we have a gap in our policy? Do we have a gap in our design? Are they going to find different loopholes around that? Because you could think you have a well-designed plan and you start to execute upon that, but then it's going to be the sales reps and the sales managers that are going to like poke holes at it and go, oops, like we didn't think about that, right?
Yeah.
There's a gap here, right? And then the other thing is like make sure your system and infrastructure is in place, that you can actually execute on it. So make sure that team is part of the design team, because everything for something to happen on the design relies on the data.
Yep.
So let's say a design, we want to introduce a new metric. That data doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
It's not being piped through. Right. So now it's something manual, someone in the back end is creating this for you. Well, how do you audit that? How do you make sure
I've heard that before. Never heard that
exactly. I mean, how many Excel spreadsheets do we have to upload a transaction file? It's like that should just be native. It should just be organic, go through the pipe versus these filters, because it doesn't exist. Right. So like, for example, like a churn target. We've had one way back when we were going to set up a churn target. We're like, where does that exist in the system? Oh, it doesn't. Oh, but I saw this dashboard and report. Oh, someone's creating it. So you want to set up a churn target based on someone else's report that's not visible to the sales leader, the sales manager, or the sales rep. Is that going to create distrust, or do they just trust you, right?
Yeah.
And when you don't tie pay to it, they'll be hesitant and go, okay, I believe you. Once you tie pay to it, then it gets very personal and emotional, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, let's prove out the data, the reports first, and then we don't have to go create some special reconciliation that we're going to go do maybe in Q3 because we didn't have the data in Q1, right? So there's a lot of things you could probably think about, like, if you think about it pre-mortem, like, oh, we don't have this data, got to go create it. That's going to create chaos in Q3 because what if that data was incorrect for 2 straight quarters, right? Or there's a hole in your policy and you're constantly getting all these exceptions. And you got, why do we get all these exceptions? There's a hole in your policy. It didn't cover this conversation or this discussion. The ROE is off, right? It's now in conflict. There's multiple ROEs, multiple policies, and everyone's relying on it. It becomes a legal source of document. And that's why you got to go back to that governance operating model. It's like, who is accountable? How do we protect the company, but yet mitigate the risk?
What's the biggest mistake you can make in governance?
I think the biggest mistake in governance is not letting people know that there's a governance structure. That's it.
Has that happened?
That's it. Because a lot of times it's done in a vacuum. Like,
wow, it's like that people don't know there's a governance structure.
There's not a governance structure. They, when you're in a high growth company, typically that's one of the last things that gets built out. So it becomes like a wild, wild west. Like, my sales leader said this. I'm going to escalate to the next sales leader if you say no, right? And it just continues to perpetuate the problem. And you need the sales leaders to understand, like, you can't keep, you need to understand what the governance structure is, get alignment, and they need to be the ones that say no, right?
Yep.
You build some cracks and some gaps into it, then, the entire dam starts to overflow with water, and, you're going to go flood the village, which is going to be your comp professionals, your Rev Op professionals, your HR people, all reacting just to survive, the crack in the dam that was created. So, yeah, be transparent. Wow. Be transparent.
Okay. That is not the answer I was expecting. But no, That's a really good reminder. Tell them that this structure exists. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
also, like, if you're making exceptions, bring like be transparent to
Yeah.
everybody else. Like, I think that's one of the things is like, oh, it's an exception. Let's just keep it between us, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we may have set precedents. We'll look at it for the next review cycle, but just start to catalog all of these, log it, be very transparent with the organization and saying, hey, these are the ones we have approved. We know there's a gap. And if there's others that come through, like, send it our way
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
adjudicate around that. And hopefully it's very similar and it'll be a quick green light stamp. Or if it's something slightly different, then it goes through the yellow or the red, right?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Just when I thought I knew everything I needed to know about governance, John, thank you. You've taught me more, and this has been super, super, super insightful. But folks who are listening or watching, that's not all. Please join us next time for another episode with John. We're going to dive deep into 2026. Another year of AI and how it's going to impact sales compensation. Thanks again to our sponsor, Acron, global leader in sales performance management. Check them out at acron.com. John, thank you again for the time. Really appreciate all the insights, and be well.